What's that sound? It's For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast.
Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. The Allentown show ended today, and I got an email from a friend saying that he had a good time up there. So I asked him if he saw any bingos while he was there, and to my surprise, he did, out on the show floor, and he sent me back some photos of a game called Single Coin. Well, I had to look on IPDB because that's one I wasn't familiar with. Single Coin is apparently a conversion of other bingo games. It sounded like one of the Ohio Dime games that they put out that were lighted scoring instead of having a replay meter. But the odd thing about this one is that it had a replay meter. So I took a look on IPDB, and apparently it's a conversion game. And the kit was for some of the Ohio Dime games with lighted scoring. So this one is incredibly odd for a number of reasons. The first is that it had a replay register. The second is it had a 28-hole bingo playfield instead of the standard 25. As far as I know, there was only one game that used a 28-hole playfield. I didn't think it was one of the lighted scoring games, but at any rate, the lifter motor had apparently been removed, and the stuck ball button, which is underneath the shooter rod, had also been removed and replaced with a Gottlieb lifter. That's kind of odd. A manual lifter, so you push in the lower rod and it lifts the ball up to the playfield to shoot. Aside from that, what's weird is that there was a bill acceptor on the front of the game, and it accepted $1 or $5 bills. Now, as far as I know, the only way to wire up one of those is via some solid-state electronics, so you would need, at a minimum, a bridge rectifier to bring your AC voltage down to DC and a particular output. But regardless, I'm curious how many credits $1 will give you. Is it a nickel a play, or is it a quarter a play? So does $1 give you 4 plays, or does it give you 20? That's a big difference. The other interesting thing is apparently for each piece of money that you put in, it will light all 6 cards automatically. This is unusual. Like on ticker tape and the other 6-card games, you put in 6 coins to light the 6 cards. Or sometimes more if they light on a mystery interval. So that's kind of funky. And the cabinet has weird graphics. It looks similar to another one on IPDB. It has the same playfield, but an entirely different back glass. And the bill acceptor, which is, I've never seen that on a bingo. So, aside from that, I don't think there was much bingo action there, but there were lots of EMs represented, at least that I've heard. There was even a Bromley Little Pro, which is a mannequin golf game, which we'll be talking about in a future episode. So, to today's topic, what I wanted to talk about was some cabinet restoration techniques. Now, I'm not a woodworking kind of guy. I do love messing with the electrical components and electronics. I love messing with mechanical assemblies, but cabinet work is not my favorite thing to do. So, luckily, my buddy Steve Smith here is an incredibly good woodworker, and I have some other friends around town that ask a question or two of. But typically, I try to get games that have okay cabinets. You know, I don't want it falling apart on me. If the paint is scuffed or missing in an area, that's not the end of the world to me. I'll do a cabinet repaint. But what does bother me is if the cabinet itself is, missing huge chunks or something of that nature, structurally. Now, if it's, had a hole drilled in it for a lock bar hasp or something like that, that's okay. I can deal with that. So, if I were to get a game that was structurally unsound, probably the first thing I'd do is contact Steve and ask him what the first thing I should do is. But I do know a few things. So if your seams are split, you want to look at all 4 of the corners of your game on both the cabinet and the head, and you want to make sure that at each corner they're still joined together well and there's no gapping or anything of that nature. If there are gaps that you can see, what you'll want to do is take a strong wood glue. The kind is up to you. I've heard it recommended to use Tight Bond. But you squirt that into the joint, and then you take a clamp and hold it closed until that glue is dry. Longer is probably better. So if you're able to keep the pressure on for a period of time after the glue is dry, that probably doesn't hurt anything. If the cabinet's gotten wet, what I like to do is just see if it's been briefly damp or if it's been wet for a really long time. If it's been wet for a really long time, I probably wouldn't have bought the game. But what I will do is investigate the condition of the bottom board and see if there's water stain. Then I'll take sandpaper, starting with a heavy grit and moving up to a lighter grit for finish, and try to sand out the water stain. Sometimes you get lucky and it's just kind of on the surface. I'm not sure what would cause that. And again, so if you're lucky and it sands out, that's great. If there is structural damage, like the bottom board is out of the channel that it fits into, then the bottom board should be replaced. The bottom board keeps dirt and bugs and all kinds of stuff out of the game. It is important structurally for the cabinet. It holds kind of the box together. As well, it enforces, the structure that the box is. So, cut that to fit and put it in place, and some glue certainly doesn't hurt. And clamp it again. Do the same for your head. On the head, if your glass decorative border is falling out, like on a wedge head, there's a very thin layer of wood that keeps the back glass from falling forward, smashing into the game. If that layer is not flush with the rest of the head, take time and re-glue it, and if you have to, cut a new one and replace it. It's not a terribly complex piece of wood cut, so you would need a jig, but other than that, it should be fairly simple, especially if you can use the old one as a template. But I digress. So if it's coming up, you do the same thing, squirt some glue in there and clamp it. And you may have to do this multiple times, all the way across the head until, it's finally set. And I would take the back glass out while I was doing this. You can leave the backboard in, but you just don't want to get glue on the glass in case you squirt too much in. So it'll clean off of the backboard. or you can just replace whatever bulbs that it happens to hit. So, aside from that, if you have leg bolts that won't go in, or they just turn and turn and turn, it's going to depend on the era of game that you're looking at, whether or not they screw in or they bolt in. But in both cases, there's some form of receiver block that has a threaded component. And if that has either come loose or is missing or is broken, then you'll need to fix that. So best case scenario, it's just loose. And in that case, just examine its neighbor and see how that one is attached. Most likely, it's attached with a couple of nails, and those nails have come out over time or stress, or who knows how it happens. I'm sure someone good with woodworking could tell you. But replacing it is fairly simple. Replacement leg bolt receivers are available from most of the parts suppliers. And it just takes a couple seconds to get one of those in. This is another thing that will improve the safety of your game, so it's another incredibly advisable thing to do if you've got one of those problems where a bolt is just turning and turning forever, or you can't get it to go in, something of that nature. You've got to find the problem. So, you've done all that. Your cabinet's looking passable. Maybe not acceptable, but passable. And you got all your bolts in. Everything is good. In your head, the way that the head works on an EM is typically that there is a neck, and then there is the cabinet. Now, the cabinet is the thing that actually has the bolt receivers for the head bolts, and there's typically 4 in an EM head. So, the neck only acts as a big wooden spacer that happens to be attractive usually. It's painted in union with the theme. So, that neck is actually one of the weakest points in the entire game. The bolts and their receivers in the cabinet are what hold the head upright. The neck just happens to hold it at an appropriate angle. So, if the neck boards are loose, you want to do your best to try to make them so that they are as sturdy as they can be. Now, those will never be as sturdy as the cabinet. It's just a thin shim that holds the head up. So it's not going to be as rigid as the cabinet. It's just not built that way. But you can, clamp it and glue it again and make it as nice as possible so that the head doesn't come weebling and wobbling and then tumbling down. So the neck, and this is another point which I've mentioned on a previous podcast, but it's worth repeating. The neck is incredibly weak, and if you are assembling a game, you don't want to lift by the neck boards. They're, again, just not made for it, and they're very loosely tacked into the solid cabinet underneath, and they will come out very easily when you have 50, 75, 100 pounds worth of mechanical and cabinetry underneath of them while you're trying to lift. So it's important to make sure, again, that the neck is sound. If the neck is missing or the neck is broken, it's important to replace it. It may not seem like it makes a big difference, but it makes a huge difference to the attractiveness of the game having the head sit at the correct height will make a big difference when you go to play the game. But also, it's a safety thing. So, though the neck bolts, or I guess the head bolts, and the receivers are made to be spaced a certain distance apart. And if you remove that spacing, it might be fine, or bad things could happen. So, no, I know what to look for in a cabinet, and that's the main thing. I know what is right for me, what's too much of a project. And if the cabinet is completely rotted away, it's not something I want to be involved in. Well, thank you again for joining me, and my name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast via RSS, or on our website, foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.